I went to buy a horse that day. 4-year-old sorrel mare, the telegram said. Good bloodlines. $175. I rode 30 miles through wind that cut like wire, temperature 20 below, thinking about profit margins and breeding stock, the kind of thoughts a man with money uses to fill the silence. The barn smelled wrong before I even pushed the door open, hay and iron and something underneath, rot sweet like infection. My breath clouded thick in the dim light slanting through wall cracks. Then I heard it, a child's wet cough echoing off stone. She was chained to the wall post by her ankle, maybe 9 years old but looking closer to 6, blue lips, blood on the handkerchief she tried to hide behind her back. A chamber pot 3 days unemptied, water bowl frozen solid beside one thin blanket. "Please, mister," she whispered. "I'm real quiet. I promise." The barn door creaked behind me, heavy footsteps. A man's voice, oily and sure. "You here for the mare?" I turned slow. The man in the doorway was thick around the middle, red-faced even in the cold, sweating through his collar. Jasper Hayes. I knew him. Owned the bank in Cheyenne Falls, held mortgages on half the valley ranches. "I'm here for a horse," I said. "Not whatever this is." He wiped his hands on stained trousers. "Girl's mine, legal guardian, got papers and everything. She's chained like an animal. Wild as one, too. Bit my son clean through the hand, safer this way." He smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "You want the mare? She's in the back stall. 175, like we agreed." I looked at the child again. She'd pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. The iron shackle had worn her ankle raw, blood-crusted black around the metal. In her other hand, she clutched a scrap of blue fabric, the only thing in that barn that looked like it belonged to a human being. "What's your name?" I asked her. "Don't got permission to speak," she whispered. Something in my chest went cold and hard. I walked to my horse, pulled the rifle from its scabbard, and came back inside. Jasper's hand twitched toward his belt. "I wouldn't," I said. I smashed the rifle butt against the chain 3 times. The old bolt gave on the third hit, ringing like a broken bell across the stone floor. The child flinched at every strike but didn't cry out. I wrapped her in my coat. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and fear held together by will. When I lifted her, she went stiff as a board. "It's all right," I said. "You're leaving here." "Well, you can't," Jasper started. "I can, and I am." As I carried her past him, out into wind that stole my breath. My wagon stood 20 yards off, horse stamping in the cold. Behind me, Jasper's voice rose high and shrill. "That's kidnapping. I'll have the law on you by sunset." I was settling the child into the wagon bed, tucking blankets around her shaking frame, when I heard hoofbeats. Fast, a rider coming hard up the road. Marshal Webb Garrison reined in beside us, his star catching the thin winter light. He was 52, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much to surprise easy. Those eyes took in the scene, me, the child, Jasper standing in the barn doorway. "Jasper filed a complaint 10 minutes ago," Webb said. "Says you're kidnapping his ward." Says, does he? "That true, Sam?" "Depends on whether you call it kidnapping to take a dying child out of chains." The marshal's office smelled of old coffee and coal smoke. I sat the child in a chair near the stove while Webb stood by his desk, arms crossed. She hadn't spoken since we left the barn, just stared at the floor, shivering even in the warmth. "Jasper's got legal guardianship," Webb said. "Parents died 2 years back, wagon accident. He's her mother's brother, only living relative." You seen how he keeps her?" "Seen a lot of things I don't like, Sam. Doesn't make them illegal." And I wound my pocket watch without thinking, an old habit, checking the time like I could somehow get more of it if I stayed vigilant. 2:47. "Then make them illegal." "Doesn't work that way?" The door opened. Grace Whitmore came in on a gust of cold air, medical bag in hand. She was a thin woman, hard-eyed, who'd buried a husband and son to cholera before moving west. She looked at the child, and her jaw tightened. "Webb sent for me," she said. "Let's see what we have." She knelt beside the chair, moving slow. "Can you tell me your name, sweetheart?" The child's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Rebecca. But Uncle Jasper calls me Becca." "Becca's a fine name. I'm Dr. Whitmore. I'm going to check you over, all right? Won't hurt." Grace worked in silence, listening to the child's chest, checking her eyes and throat, examining the raw ankle. When she found the bloody handkerchief tucked in Becca's dress pocket, she held it up to the light. The stains were dark, almost black. "How long have you been coughing blood?" Grace asked. "Don't know." "Long time." Grace stood and pulled Webb and me aside. When she spoke, her voice was low and flat. "Advanced consumption, both lungs. She's malnourished, hypothermic, and I'd wager hasn't seen real food in weeks. Without immediate care, she has maybe 6 weeks. With care, 6 months if we're lucky." The room tilted slightly. I put my hand on the desk to steady myself. "Marshal," Grace said, turning to face Webb directly. You have to decide right now what matters more, paperwork or that little girl's life. Webb was quiet for a long moment, looking at Becca. She'd pulled her knees up again, making herself small in the chair. Finally, he sighed like a man carrying too much weight. 48 hours, Sam. I'll tell Jasper there's a medical emergency and you're acting as temporary guardian pending a hearing. Judge Clayton's circuit comes through day after tomorrow. He'll decide. Webb's hand rested on his gun belt. But if you run, I'll bring you back in irons. Understand? I understand. Good. Get her warm. Get her fed. Grace, you draft up a medical report for the judge. I lifted Becca again. She was already falling asleep against my shoulder, exhausted past fear. As I carried her toward the door, Webb called after me. Sam, Jasper Hayes doesn't forgive and he doesn't forget. You just made yourself an enemy who owns half this town. The town hall smelled of wet wool and wood polish. Every bench was full, breath clouds rising from 24 mouths in the unheated room. Judge Clayton sat behind a makeshift bench, just the schoolteacher's desk dragged to the front, while Jasper Hayes stood to his right, flanked by two men in good suits. Railroad lawyers, by the look of them. I sat in the front row with Becca beside me. Grace had cleaned her up, dressed her in borrowed clothes, but the child still looked half dead. Her breathing came shallow and wet, and twice during the proceedings she coughed into a handkerchief I'd given her. She was careful to hide the blood each time. Jasper presented his papers first. Guardianship documents notarized and witnessed. A letter from his bank's board of directors attesting to his good character. Even a statement from his minister. Your Honor, he said, his voice carrying that same oily certainty from the barn. I understand Mr. Cordell's concern, but sentiment doesn't override law. Rebecca is my ward, legally appointed by this very court 2 years ago. I provided for her shelter, food, medical care, at considerable personal expense. Someone in the back coughed. It sounded like disagreement. Furthermore, Jasper continued, Mr. Cordell's actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, constitute kidnapping. He broke into my property, destroyed my belongings, and removed my ward without permission. This kind of sentimentality is bad for business, Your Honor, bad for this whole community. If men of means can simply take what they want based on feeling rather than law, where does it end? Several heads nodded, merchants mostly, men who kept accounts at Jasper's bank. The room's division was visible, the well-dressed on one side, working folks on the other, and silence between them like a frozen river. Judge Clayton looked at me. But, Cordell, your response? I stood. I don't have fancy papers, Your Honor, just what I saw. That child was chained in a barn, in 20 below weather, coughing blood, with no heat and no care. Doc, Whitmore's medical report is in front of you. It speaks plain. The report says that the child is ill, Clayton said. It doesn't prove neglect. No, she was chained. For her own safety, according to Mr. Hayes. Children can be difficult, especially after trauma like losing parents. The words landed like stones in my gut. I glanced at Becca. She was staring at the floor, making herself invisible. Then Esther Marsh stood up in the third row. She was 65, ran the hotel, and had a voice like creek gravel. Judge Clayton, if I may. Mrs. Marsh? I remember when Jasper Hayes was a boy, he killed a dog once for barking too much, drowned it in a rain barrel while his mother was at church. That child never had a chance with him. The room went dead quiet. Then, slow as sunrise, the banker's wife stood up and moved to sit beside Esther. Another woman followed, then a ranch hand. The split in the room widened, became permanent. Judge Clayton banged his gavel. Order, this isn't a character trial. He shuffled papers, and I could see him calculating. Political wins, money, influence, law. Hayes retains legal guardianship. However, given Dr. Whitmore's concerns, Mr. Cordell is granted supervised visitation, 2 hours per week with Marshal Garrison present. Court will revisit this matter in 30 days. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, frozen mud crunched under my boots. Grace walked beside me, her face tight with anger. Becca had already been loaded into Jasper's carriage. He'd practically dragged her from the courtroom while she looked back at me with eyes that asked a question I couldn't answer. Sam, Grace whispered, pulling me aside. When I examined her in that barn, I found something else. A document, hidden under the floorboards near where she was chained. What kind of document? A will. Forged, I think. The signatures don't match the originals I saw in the probate file, but it names Jasper as sole heir to Rebecca's estate if she dies before her 12th birthday. The winter air suddenly felt colder. How much is the estate worth? $50,000. The ranch, water rights for the whole valley, and mineral rights the railroad wants for an easement. $50,000. More money than most men saw in a lifetime. Enough to kill for. I was processing this when Jasper walked past, adjusting his hat. He paused beside me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. She'll be dead in 30 days anyway, Cordell. Save yourself the money on lawyers. Something in his tone made me look at him sharply. What money's that, Jasper? His face went pale. Just for a second, but I saw it. The realization that he'd said too much revealed what he shouldn't have known about medical timelines he'd supposedly been trying to prevent. He recovered fast, sneering. Common sense. Girl's clearly dying. He climbed into his carriage and snapped the reins. But I'd seen it. The slip. The truth. Webb Garrison came up beside me, watching the carriage roll away through the gray afternoon. You know what you're up against now? I do. He's got the law, the money, and most of the town's credit accounts. You've got 48 hours of legal visitation and 30 days until the judge decides permanent custody. Webb's breath clouded white between us. What are you going to do? I wound my pocket watch, feeling the familiar tick against my palm. 2:47, always 2:47 in my mind, the time I'd found her. I'm going to make sure that when she dies, it's not alone in chains, and I'm going to make sure Jasper Hayes doesn't profit from it. The visitation room at Marshal Garrison's office was 8 feet square, heated by a small stove that ticked and popped. Grace sat in the corner as required, knitting something while pretending not to listen. I'd brought what I could carry, a loaf of bread, still warm from Esther's kitchen, wrapped in cloth that smelled of yeast and butter, 6 blue ribbons I'd bought from the dry goods store, and a book, Treasure Island. Becca sat across from me at the small table, her hands folded in her lap like she was afraid to touch anything without permission. The bruising on her wrists had darkened to purple-black. I brought you something, I said, pushing the bread toward her. She looked at it but didn't move. It's all right. It's yours. Slowly she reached out and tore off a piece. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. When she finally got it to her mouth, she chewed like someone who'd forgotten what food tasted like. Her eyes closed. When did you last eat? I asked. Don't remember. Uncle Jasper says I cost too much to feed proper. I slid the ribbons across next. These are for you, too. Saw them in the window and thought, well, I thought a girl ought to have something pretty. She touched one with a single finger, like it might vanish. Then she looked up at me with eyes too old for her face. Why are you being nice to me? Because someone should be. But you don't even know me. I know enough. She was quiet a long time, winding one ribbon around her finger. The stove ticked. Outside, wind rattled the window frame. Finally, she spoke again, so soft I almost missed it. My mama and papa died 2 years ago. Wagon wheel broke on the mountain pass, went over the side. I was visiting Aunt Clara in town, so I wasn't there. Her voice caught. Uncle Jasper came to get me, said he'd take care of me. At first he did, but then he started saying I was costing him money, that the ranch was his by rights, that I was just a burden, eating through his inheritance. What inheritance? The ranch. And the creek rights. Uncle says they're worth a lot. Railroad wants to run track through the property, needs water for the steam engines. She coughed, wet and rattling into her sleeve. He locked me in the barn 6 months ago. Said it was temporary, till he sorted things. But he never came back except to bring water sometimes. And even that stopped. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Did he hurt you, besides the chain? She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to put my fist through the wall. Instead, I opened the book. You know how to read? Mama was teaching me, but I forgot most of it. Then we'll learn again, together. I found the first page, Treasure Island, by Robert Louis Stevenson, Chapter 1. I remember him as if it were yesterday. Her eyes lit up for the first time since I'd met her. I read for the full 2 hours, until Webb knocked on the door to signal time was up. When I stood to leave, Becca grabbed my hand, the first time she'd touched me voluntarily. Did you have a little girl once, Mr. Cordell? The question hit like a bullet. I stood there, unable to speak, the old wound ripping open fresh. Emily, 8 years old, dead of scarlet fever 7 winters past. Clara died of grief a year later, and I'd spent every day since building wealth I didn't need to fill house too big for one man. Becca was watching me with those 2 knowing eyes. You know how to be a papa, she said quietly. I can tell. 3 days later, Webb Garrison came to my ranch just after dawn. I was in the barn, mucking stalls, when I heard his horse. He had papers in his hand and a grim smile on his face. Found something, he said. Been going through Jasper's bank records, the ones he keeps in the main vault, not the ones in his office. Took some convincing to get the assistant manager to let me look. And Jasper's been billing Rebecca's estate for her care. $5 a day, every day for 2 years. That's over $3,600. For care he wasn't providing. For care that consisted of chains and a barn floor. Webb unfolded the papers. Medical expenses, clothing, food, education, all itemized, all billed to the estate account, but I checked with every merchant in town. None of them have receipts matching these dates or amounts. He's been stealing from a child. The barn smelled of hay and horse and, faintly, of the manure I'd been shoveling. I leaned on the pitchfork, letting this sink in. That's fraud. And embezzlement. And about 6 other charges I can make stick. Webb's grin widened. I'm calling an emergency hearing, today. Judge Clayton's still in town. I already sent word. Jasper will fight. Let him. I've got his ledgers in my office, under lock and key. He doesn't even know they're gone yet. The courthouse was less crowded this time, but the people who came were different. More working folks, fewer merchants. Word had spread about the ledgers. Grace sat beside me, her medical bag at her feet. Jasper arrived late, his face already red with anger. Judge Clayton banged his gavel. We're here for an emergency modification of custody, based on new evidence. Marshal? Webb presented the ledgers, page by page. The judge's face grew darker with each entry. $5 a day, 730 days. Every charge documented in Jasper's own neat handwriting. Mr. Hayes, Clayton said, his voice like iron. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't remand you into custody right now. Those records are private bank documents. They're evidence of fraud against a minor ward. Jasper's lawyer stood up, tried to object, but Clayton waved him down. I've seen enough. Emergency custody is granted to Samuel Cordell for a period of 60 days, pending full criminal investigation into the estate accounts. Rebecca Hayes is to be released into his care immediately. Marshal, see to it. The gavel fell. I sat there, stunned. Grace squeezed my arm. You won, she whispered. But as I walked out to Jasper's carriage to collect Becca, I saw his face through the window. Not defeated. Calculating. Planning. Becca was huddled in the back seat, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. When she saw me, her whole body started shaking, and then she was crying, deep, gasping sobs that sounded like they'd been held back for years. Am I really going with you? She asked through the tears. Yes, child. I carried her to my wagon. She weighed nothing. Grace climbed up beside us, and as we started toward my ranch, she leaned close and whispered, Sam, we need to talk. Tonight. After she's asleep. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. What is it? Not here. Tonight. 3 weeks at the ranch changed things I hadn't known were broken. Becca slept in the guest room, the one that had stayed empty since Clara died, the one I'd walked past without opening for 7 years. Grace moved into the room next door, said she wanted to monitor Becca's condition closely. I suspected she also wanted to make sure I didn't fall apart. The first morning, Becca stood in the kitchen doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter. I was making coffee, same as I had every morning for years, but now the silence felt different. Heavy. You hungry? I asked. She nodded. I made eggs and biscuits, more than one person needed, and watched her eat. She used her fork carefully, like she was remembering table manners from a life before chains. After 3 bites, she started crying. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she whispered. That's what's wrong. It's all so nice, and I keep waiting for it to stop. By the second week, she'd gained 8 pounds. Grace said it like it was a victory, but I could see the doctor's eyes when she examined Becca each morning, always checking, always listening to that wet cough that never quite went away. Becca started helping with small chores, collecting eggs from the henhouse, folding laundry. She moved through the house like she was memorizing it, touching things gently, the curtains, the books on the shelf, the carved duck Clara had made me for our first anniversary. Tell me about your wife, she said one evening while I was reading Treasure Island to her. What do you want to know? Did she like to read too? She did. She'd read to our daughter every night before bed. Becca's eyes widened. You had a daughter? I'd said it without thinking. The secret I'd kept locked away for 7 years, spilled out like water through a cracked deed. Saw Emily. She died when she was 8. Scarlet fever. Clara, my wife, died a year later. Doctor said it was her heart, but I knew better. Grief is what killed her. I'm sorry you lost them, Becca said. So simply and honestly that it hurt worse than any elaborate sympathy ever had. Me too. Is that why you know how to be nice to kids? Because you were a papa before? I suppose. She was quiet for a moment, then, do you think Emily would have liked me? My throat closed up. I think she would have loved you. By week 3, Becca was laughing sometimes. Small laughs, hesitant, like she was testing whether joy was allowed. She learned the names of all the cattle, made up stories about them. She helped me mend a fence post, her small hands holding the wire while I hammered. Miss Cordell? Yeah? Uncle Jasper used to say I owned the creek that runs through the ranch. Is that true? Your parents' land includes water rights for the main creek. Feeds 5 ranches downstream, including mine. It's worth considerable money, especially with the railroad wanting access. Oh. She thought about this. That's why Uncle wanted... Yeah, that's why. She went quiet again. The wind carried the smell of pine and cold earth. That particular scent of late winter when the ground is thinking about thawing but hasn't quite committed. That evening, we ate dinner at the big table, me, Becca, and Grace. Becca told a story about one of the hens she'd named Mrs. Grumpy. She was mid-sentence laughing when the cough hit, different from before, deeper, wetter. She grabbed her napkin, turned away. When she pulled it back, I saw it. Blood, darker than before, more of it. Grace's fork clattered to her plate. Becca, Grace said, her voice carefully calm. I need to examine you, right now. Grace's medical examination took 20 minutes. I waited in the hallway outside Becca's room, listening to the murmur of voices, the occasional cough. My pocket watch was in my hand again, wound so tight I thought the spring might break. 3:15, 3:16, 3:17. When Grace finally emerged, her face told me everything before she spoke. Parlor, now. We stood by the cold fireplace. Through the window, I could see the last light draining from the western sky, leaving everything gray and uncertain. It's spread, Grace said. Both lungs now, and there's pneumonia developing. The malnutrition and exposure from those 6 months in the barn, her body couldn't fight it. She paused, and I saw her decide to just say it plain. I gave you a timeline of 6 months at the hearing. I was wrong. 4 to 8 weeks, Sam, maybe less. The room tilted. I put my hand on the mantel to steady myself. I thought the good food, the warmth, I thought we had time. I know, so did I. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. But consumption doesn't care about good intentions. It doesn't care about money or medicine or how much we love her. It's going to take her, Sam. The only question is whether she suffers or whether she goes peacefully. There has to be something. Specialists in Denver. Experimental treatments. She'd die in the wagon before you made 50 miles. And even if she survived the trip, they'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. Grace put her hand on my arm. You can't save her, but you can give her something Jasper never did. You can give her dignity, love, a good death instead of a bad one. I couldn't breathe. The walls were pressing in, the air too thick. I can't, Grace, I can't watch another daughter die. I can't do it again. You won't watch alone, she said quietly. And this time, you get to say goodbye. Emily was gone, before you could tell her you loved her. Becca's still here, still needs you. The question is whether you're going to run from that or face it. I wanted to argue, to rage, to do something, anything but stand there accepting the unacceptable. But Grace was right. I'd spent 7 years running from grief, building walls of money and solitude so high nothing could touch me. And now a dying 9-year-old had climbed over every one of them. What do I do? I asked, my voice breaking. You love her, for however long she has left. You make sure she knows she matters, that she's not alone, that someone chose her. Grace squeezed my arm. And when the time comes, you let her go. That night, I sat on the porch long after Grace and Becca had gone to bed. The temperature was dropping, frost forming on the rail. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called and was answered. The sound of creatures finding each other in the vast empty. I wound my pocket watch again. 3:47? The hours kept moving whether I wanted them to or not, and somewhere upstairs, a child I'd known for 3 weeks was dying, and there wasn't enough money in the world to buy her more time. The only thing I could buy was making sure those weeks mattered. The morning air smelled of thawing earth and possibility, even though I knew better. March had come with warmer winds, melting the ice on the water troughs, turning the roads to mud. Becca sat in the wheelchair Grace had borrowed from the church, too weak now to walk more than a few steps without exhausting herself. Can we go outside? She asked. Just for a little while? I wrapped her in blankets and pushed the chair down the ramp I'd built off the back porch. The wheels stuck in the mud, but I didn't care. She needed to see something besides walls and ceilings. We stopped at the paddock where the cattle grazed. Spring calves were being born, wobbly-legged and curious. Becca watched them with something like wonder on her thin face. They don't know how lucky they are, she said. Being born when everything's starting instead of ending. You're not ending, you're just... I couldn't finish the lie. It's okay, Mr. Cordell, I heard Dr. Whitmore talking. I know I'm dying. She said it so matter-of-factly it broke something in me. I'm not scared of it anymore. I just don't want it to hurt too bad. I knelt beside the wheelchair so we were eye level. It won't. Grace will make sure of that. Good. She was quiet a moment. Then, what happens to your ranch when you die? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Hadn't thought much about it. You should. It's real pretty. Someone should take care of it. I looked out at the land I'd bought with cattle money and railroad investments, the empire I'd built to fill the emptiness. I was thinking, I said slowly, about changing my will, leaving money to build a hospital. For kids like you, so they don't have to suffer without proper care. Her eyes widened. How much money? $120,000. She couldn't grasp the number. It was too big for a child's understanding, but she understood the intention. That'd be real nice, she whispered. Kids should have doctors who care. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and warming soil. A meadowlark called from the fence post. Becca turned her face toward the sound, eyes closed, like she was memorizing it. Uncle Jasper used to tell me I was a waste of food, she said, that I'd never amount to nothing. But maybe if a hospital gets built because of me, that's amounting to something, right? You amount to something already, Becca, just by being here. She smiled, small and tired. You're a good liar, Mr. Cordell. That evening, Webb Garrison came to the ranch with Esther Marsh and 5 other women from town. They crowded into my parlor, bringing the smell of rain-dampened wool and determination. We need to talk about Jasper, Webb said without preamble. I've been digging deeper into those bank records. The embezzlement goes beyond what I presented at the hearing. He's stolen over $12,000 from Rebecca's estate over 2 years. Esther set down her knitting. And I've been talking to folks. The blacksmith's wife remembers seeing Rebecca with bruises before she disappeared. The schoolteacher noticed she stopped coming to class 6 months back. People knew something was wrong, but nobody spoke up because Jasper controls too much credit in this town. That changes now, said Mary Chen, who ran the general store. We're gathering written testimonies. Everyone who saw something, heard something, suspected something. It won't be just your word against his anymore, Sam. He's planning something, I said. Grace told me he tried to visit Becca 3 times while I was in town last week. She turned him away each time, but he's getting desperate. Webb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The railroad deadline's coming up, May 15th. He needs Rebecca to either sign over the water rights or die before her 12th birthday. That forged, Will I found. It specifically states the estate passes to him only if she dies before turning 12. When's her birthday? November 3rd. She'll be 10. So he's got 6 months, I said. But she's got weeks. The room went quiet. Rain pattered on the tin roof, steady and relentless. There's more, Webb continued. I got word this afternoon. Jasper filed an appeal. Claims Rebecca's incompetent to testify due to her illness. Says she's delusional from fever, that any statements she made about abuse are unreliable. He wants custody back. Hearings in 10 days. My hands clenched into fists. He wants her back so he can finish what he started, Esther said grimly. Let her die under his care and claim the estate. Over my dead body. Webb stood, putting on his hat. Might come to that, Sam. Jasper Hayes plays for keeps, and he's got lawyers money can buy. We need to be smarter. Document everything. Keep witnesses around at all times. And for God's sake, don't give him any excuse to claim you're unfit. After they left, I sat alone in the parlor, listening to the rain. Upstairs, I could hear Grace reading to Becca, something about pirates and treasure. The child's laughter, thin and bright, drifted down. 10 days, a hearing, and a dying child caught between law and greed. I wound my pocket watch, 4:23. The hours kept moving, each one stealing something I couldn't get back. Somewhere out there, Jasper Hayes was planning his next move, and I needed to be ready. The rumors started in the saloon. By the time they reached the church steps, they'd grown teeth. Sam Cordell's playing the hero, but it's all about money. That water rights estate is worth $50,000. He sees profit in a dying child just like Jasper does. Maybe worse, at least Jasper's family. I heard it myself 3 days later, standing outside the general store, while mud sucked at my boots. 2 merchants were loading supplies, their voices carrying in the damp air. Hayes makes a fair point, one said. Rich man swoops in, plays savior, and when the girl dies, he's positioned to claim the estate through some legal maneuver. Happens all the time. Jasper's her bloodkin, though. That's gotta count for something. I stepped around the corner. Both men went quiet, faces flushing. Gentlemen, I said, tipping my hat. They mumbled greetings and hurried off, wheels splashing through puddles the color of rust. The sky hung low and gray, threatening more rain. Everything smelled of wet earth and rotting leaves, spring trying to come, but not quite making it. By Sunday, half the town had heard Jasper's version. He was smart about it, never saying it directly, just planting seeds in careful soil. I'm worried about my niece, he told people at the bank. Sam Cordell's a good man, but he's lonely, desperate for family. What happens when she dies? And he's spent all that time and money. Will he claim some right to her estate? I'm just trying to protect what's rightfully hers. The words were poison wrapped in concern. The confrontation came on Main Street, Tuesday afternoon. I was leading my horse toward the livery when Jasper stepped out of the bank, flanked by his lawyer and 2 men I didn't recognize. Railroad men, by their eastern suits and hard eyes. Cordell, Jasper called out, loud enough for the dozen people on the street to hear. I want to talk about Rebecca. Nothing to talk about. I think there is. He walked closer, his boots squelching in the mud. I've been patient. Gave you time with her. Didn't fight the custody order as hard as I could have. But people are starting to ask questions about your motives, about what happens to that child's estate when she passes. My motives are keeping her alive and comfortable. Are they? Jasper's voice rose, playing to the audience. Or are you positioning yourself to claim legal guardianship of her assets? A wealthy man like you doesn't need that money, but maybe it's not about need. Maybe it's about control, about power. My jaw clenched. You kept her chained in a barn. I kept her safe from herself. She was violent, uncontrollable. She weighs 60 pounds and can barely walk across a room without coughing blood. Because you've let her condition deteriorate under your care. Jasper's face reddened. I'm filing for emergency custody review. That child is dying, and you're using her for... I took a step forward. Jasper's hand moved toward his coat. The railroad men shifted their weight, ready. Say what you came to say, I told him quietly. You're a rich man who sees profit in a dying child, Jasper said, his voice dropping to something colder. At least I'm honest about family obligations. You're just playing the hero while counting the money you'll claim when she's gone. The street had gone silent. Faces in windows. People stopped mid-stride. All of them watching, judging, deciding. I wanted to hit him. Wanted to feel his teeth break under my knuckles. Instead, I turned and walked away, leading my horse through the mud, leaving Jasper standing there with his victory smile. Behind me, I heard him say to his lawyer, loud enough to carry, "See? Can't even defend himself. Guilty conscience, I'd wager." That night, Webb Garrison came to the ranch after dark. He knocked 3 times, our signal, and I let him in through the kitchen. Rain drummed on the roof, steady and cold. "Brought you something," Webb said, pulling a document from inside his coat. "Took some doing, but I got into the county clerk's archive. This is the will filed when Rebecca's parents died." He spread it on the table. Clean, simple, leaving everything to Rebecca with Jasper as guardian until she turned 18. "Now look at this." He laid another document beside it. "This is the will I found hidden in Jasper's barn." The second will was different. Same signatures, same witnesses, but the text had changed. If Rebecca dies before her 12th birthday, the estate passes to Jasper Hayes, her maternal uncle and guardian. If she lives past 12, it reverts to the original terms. "The signatures are forged?" Webb said. I had a handwriting expert from Laramie look at them. "This will was created sometime in the last 6 months." After he locked her in the barn. "Exactly." Webb pointed to the date. "Look here. This is dated 2 weeks before her parents died. But the paper's wrong. This kind of linen stock wasn't available in Wyoming until last year." He got sloppy. My mind was racing. "Her birthday's November 3rd. She'll be 10. Which means she has to die in the next 8 months for this forged will to work. But here's the thing, Sam. The railroad deadline is May 15th, 2 weeks from now. They need the water rights easement signed by then, or they move the route 20 miles south. That's a $20,000 payment Jasper's counting on." "So, he's trapped," I said slowly. "He needs her alive long enough to sign over the railroad easement, but dead before her 12th birthday to claim the estate. And the doctor says she's only got weeks. He's running out of time on both ends, which makes him desperate." Webb rolled up the documents. "Desperate men do desperate things. You need to be ready, Sam. He's going to make a move, and it's coming soon." Grace appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "How soon?" Webb looked at her. "He tried to bribe my deputy this afternoon. Offered him $200 to look the other way if anything should happen at the Cordell Ranch. Deputy reported it straight to me, but there might be others who'd take the money," I finished. "I can't protect you every hour of every day. And if he gets men to come here, claims he's acting within his legal rights as guardian." Webb shook his head. "The law's on his side until we can prove fraud in court, and that takes time Rebecca doesn't have." Thunder rumbled, closer now. The rain intensified, hammering the roof like nails. "He's going to try to take her," Grace said. "Or kill her here and claim it was natural causes. Either way, he gets what he wants." I stood, walking to the window. Outside, lightning flickered, illuminating the barn and the muddy yard and the long road that led to town. Somewhere out there, Jasper Hayes was planning, bribing, positioning. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance," I said. "We prepare, we get every witness we can, we document everything, and we make damn sure that when he comes, and he will come, we're ready." Webb put his hat back on. "I'll position some men I trust around the property, quietly, and I'll start building the criminal case, the forgery, the embezzlement, all of it. But Sam," he paused at the door, "you understand what you're up against. He's got lawyers, money, and half this town scared of losing their credit. You've got a dying child and a ticking clock." "I understand." After Webb left, I sat at the kitchen table, The forged will still spread before me. Upstairs, I could hear Becca coughing, then Grace's soft voice soothing her. The sound of morphine being measured out. The sound of a child being made comfortable while dying. Jasper Hayes wanted her dead before November 3rd. She probably wouldn't live to see April end. The cruelest irony, we were both racing the same clock. Becca wasn't supposed to hear. Grace and I were talking in the hallway outside her room, voices low, but the door was cracked open, and the child had always been too smart for her own good. 4 weeks, Grace was saying. Maybe less. The pneumonia's progressing faster than I expected. I'm giving her morphine now, just small doses to manage the pain, but soon that's all we'll be able to do. Keep her comfortable while she... I know, I said. Silence. Then a sound from inside the room. A small gasp, quickly stifled. I pushed the door open. Becca sat in her bed, the quilt pulled up to her chin, her eyes too bright in her thin face. She'd been crying but had wiped the tears away fast, like she'd learned to do in Jasper's barn. How long were you listening? I asked. Long enough. Her voice shook. I'm dying. Really dying. Not in months. In weeks. Grace moved to sit on the bed, but Becca held up a hand. Don't tell me it's going to be okay. Or that miracles happen or any of that. Just tell me the truth. Please. I sat in the chair beside the bed. The room smelled of carbolic acid and the lavender sachets Grace had placed around to cover the sickness. Smell. Outside, rain dripped from the eaves, a steady melancholy rhythm. The consumption's in both lungs, I said. The time you spent in that barn, the cold, the malnutrition, your body couldn't fight it. Dr. Whitmore's doing everything she can, but sometimes medicine isn't enough. How long? A month? Maybe a little more, maybe less. No way to know for certain. She absorbed this, her small hands gripping the quilt. Does it hurt? At the end? No, Grace said firmly. I'll make sure of that. The morphine will keep you comfortable. You'll just get tired, and then I'll go to sleep and not wake up. Becca's voice was steady now, accepting. 9 years old and facing death with more grace than most men I'd known. Like Mama and Papa, like them, I agreed. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Then, Mr. Cordell, you remember you told me I own the creek that runs through the ranch? I remember. So how many people need that water? 5 ranches downstream, about 30 families total, maybe more. It's the main water source for irrigation. And Uncle Jasper wants it? For the railroad? Yes. So if I die and he gets the estate, what happens to those families? I glanced at Grace. She gave a small nod. Tell her the truth. The railroad would divert most of the water for their steam engines. The ranches would dry up. Families would have to leave or sell at a loss. This whole valley would change. Becca processed this, her young face serious. That's not right. Those people didn't do nothing wrong. They shouldn't lose everything just because I'm dying. Becca, I want to give them the land, she said suddenly. Not to Uncle Jasper, not to the railroad, to the town. For a school or something. So kids can learn to read, like you taught me. And so those families can keep their water. The rain picked up, drumming harder on the roof. Lightning flickered. And in the brief light, I saw her face. Thin, pale, but determined. That's your inheritance, I said. $50,000. Your future. I don't have a future, Mr. Cordell. She said it so simply it hurt worse than any scream. But maybe I can give one to someone else. That's amounting to something, right? Like you said? Grace wiped her eyes. I couldn't speak. Will you help me? Becca asked. Will you make sure the papers are right so Uncle Jasper can't take it after I'm gone? I will. Oh, I managed. I promise. She lay back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. Good. That's good. Her eyes were already closing. I'm real tired now. Grace measured out morphine while I sat there, watching a child who had been given nothing but cruelty decide to give away everything she had. By nightfall, Webb had returned with a lawyer from Laramie, a thin woman named Catherine Rhodes, who specialized in estate law. We gathered in my study while Becca slept upstairs, Grace watching over her. It's legal, Catherine said, reviewing the documents she'd drawn up. Rebecca Hayes, being of sound mind, gives her estate in trust to the town of Cheyenne Falls, specifically for the establishment of a public school and the preservation of water rights for downstream ranches. The trust is irrevocable once signed and witnessed. Will it hold up against Jasper's challenge? I asked. If she signs it while clearly competent with multiple witnesses, and we file it immediately with the county clerk? Yes. The forged will becomes irrelevant. There's no estate for him to inherit. Everything goes to the trust. Webb leaned against the desk. He'll fight it. Let him. He'll lose. Catherine packed up her papers. But you need to understand, the moment this is filed, Jasper has no legal reason to want Rebecca alive. Right now, he's torn between needing her signature for the railroad deal and wanting her dead for the estate. Once this trust is signed, he loses both. He might come for her, I finished, try to stop her from signing, or worse. Exactly. After Catherine left, Webb and I made plans. He'd positioned 3 men he trusted around the property, ranch hands who'd worked for me for years, men who wouldn't take Jasper's bribes. We moved Becca's room to the interior of the house, away from windows. I oiled my rifle and checked the ammunition. Esther Marsh arrived near midnight with 2 other women from town. "We'll take shifts," she said. "Someone awake at all times. You try to stop us and I'll box your ears, Sam Cordell." I didn't try to stop them. The land gift deed sat on my desk, unsigned. Tomorrow, if Becca was strong enough, we'd gather witnesses and make it official. 1 signature, and Jasper's schemes would collapse. 1 signature, and a dying child would save 30 families she'd never met. I sat on the porch near 2 in the morning, rifle across my knees, listening to the night. The rain had stopped, but the mud squelched with every small sound. Rats maybe, or possums. The smell of wet earth was everywhere, rich and dark. Then I heard it. Different from animal sounds. Deliberate. Horses, multiple horses, coming slow up the road, trying to be quiet. I stood, working the rifle's lever with a sound like breaking bones in the darkness. Behind me, the front door opened. Webb stepped out, gun drawn. Then Esther, holding a shotgun like she knew how to use it. The horses stopped just beyond the fence line. 4 riders, maybe 5, shapes in the darkness. "That's far enough," I called out. A match flared. In the brief light, I saw Jasper Hayes sitting astride a roan gelding, flanked by men who carried the weight of hired guns. "I'm here for my niece," he said. "Legal guardian." Got it right. "You lost that right when you chained her in a barn. Judge says different." "I got papers from the county clerk, emergency order. Says the child's incompetent due to illness, custody reverts to me effective immediately." He held up a document. "You're interfering with legal authority, Cordell." "Funny," Webb said, stepping into the lamplight, his marshal's star visible. "I didn't issue any such order, and I'm the law in this county." Jasper's horse shifted nervously. "District judge out of Laramie. Your authority's superseded, Marshal." 2 in the morning? With hired guns? That's not how legal transfers work, Jasper." On which Webb raised his pistol. "You and your men turn around. Come back at a decent hour with proper documentation and maybe we'll talk." For a long moment, nobody moved. The hired guns' hands drifted toward their weapons. My finger tightened on the trigger. Then from inside the house, a sound. Becca, coughing, wet and desperate. The sound of a dying child. Jasper smiled in the darkness. "Clock's ticking, Cordell. On all of us." And he turned his horse and rode away, his men following. But I knew in my bones, this wasn't over. They came the next night. I was dozing in the chair beside Becca's bed when I heard it. Boots on the porch, trying to be quiet. Then the sound of the back door handle, turning, testing. Finding it locked. I was on my feet before the glass broke. "Grace," I shouted. "Get Becca to the root cellar." The doctor appeared in the doorway, still in her nightclothes. She scooped Becca from the bed. The child barely woke, too deep in morphine sleep, and ran toward the kitchen stairs. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the hallway. 3 men were coming through the broken window. I fired once into the ceiling. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, and it did what I wanted. Stopped them mid-climb, made them think. "Next one goes through flesh," I said. From outside, Jasper's voice. "We're here legal, Cordell. Emergency custody order." At 3 in the morning? Through a broken window? More sounds, front door splintering. They'd brought a ram. I fell back toward the kitchen, firing twice more to slow them. The house smelled of gun smoke and fear. Then from outside, a different sound. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Coming fast. Esther Marsh's voice rang out like a church bell. "That's far enough, Jasper Hayes." I reached the kitchen window and looked out. What I saw made me believe in miracles. 15 riders, maybe 20, coming up from the south pasture. Webb Garrison leading them, his marshal's star catching the lamplight. Behind him, ranch hands from neighboring spreads, farmers, the blacksmith, even old Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church. Every man held a rifle or shotgun. The men who'd been breaking into my house froze. Jasper sat on his horse in the yard, his face pale in the lantern light. "Marshal," he said, trying for authority. "This is legal. No judge issues emergency custody at 3 a.m., Webb said. What you're doing is called breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, an assault with intent." He gestured to his men. "Everyone here is witness, so here's what happens next. You and your hired guns drop your weapons. You come with me, peaceful-like, or we do this the hard way." One of Jasper's men, a scar-faced thug from Laramie, reached for his pistol. 3 rifles swung toward him. He reconsidered. This isn't over, Jasper said, his voice shaking with rage. That land is mine by right. The child's incompetent. The contract isn't— He stopped, realized what he'd said. Webb smiled slow. What contract would that be? Jasper? The one for the railroad easement? The one you need Rebecca to sign? Funny thing, you just admitted your motive in front of 20 witnesses. Jasper's face went from pale to crimson. That is, you meant exactly what you said. Webb drew his gun. You're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, breaking and entering, and about 6 other charges I'll think of by morning. Boys, disarm them. Judge Clayton arrived at my ranch 3 days later, bringing a court clerk and a leather satchel full of documents. Becca was too weak to travel, so the law came to her. We set up in the parlor, makeshift courtroom that smelled of wood polish and the lilac water Grace used to wash Becca's face. Becca sat in her wheelchair, wrapped in quilts despite the warming spring air. Her breathing was labored, rattling in her chest. She'd lost more weight, her face skeletal, but her eyes were clear and determined. Jasper stood in chains between 2 deputies, his expensive suit rumpled, his face haggard. The fight had gone out of him. What remained was just spite. Judge Clayton banged a spoon against a tin cup, our makeshift gavel. This is an emergency hearing regarding the criminal charges against Jasper Hayes and the disposition of the estate of Rebecca Hayes. Let's proceed. Webb presented the evidence first. The ledgers showing $12,400 stolen from Becca's estate over 2 years, $5 a day for care that consisted of chains and starvation. The forged will, with its impossible paper stock and clumsy signatures. The testimonies from 20 witnesses who'd watched Jasper try to break into my home. The defendant's own words, Webb said, in front of multiple witnesses. That land is mine. The contract isn't valid. He admitted he was after the railroad easement, needed Rebecca's signature, or her death to claim it. Clayton reviewed the documents in silence. Outside, birds sang. Meadowlarks and robins, the sound of spring finally arriving. The smell of warming earth drifted through the open windows. Hayes, Clayton said finally, I've seen many cases of greed in my 30 years on the bench, but stealing from a dying child while claiming guardianship? That's a new low. He looked at Becca. Young lady, are you able to speak? Yes, sir, Becca said, her voice thin but steady. Do you understand what's happening here? My uncle stole my mama and papa's money. He locked me up so I'd die, and he'd get everything. And he tried to make me sign papers for the railroad. She coughed into a handkerchief. When she pulled it away, I saw blood. But I don't want him to have nothing. I want to give it to the town instead. The land gift deed, Catherine Rhodes said, stepping forward. Rebecca wishes to place her entire estate in trust for the establishment of a public school and the preservation of water rights for the valley's ranches. The documents are prepared and witnessed, and Clayton examined the deed. This is legally binding. Once signed, the estate passes irrevocably to the trust. Is this your wish, Rebecca? Yes, sir. Those families need the water, and kids should get to learn reading, like Mr. Cordell taught me. And let's make it official. Catherine placed the document on a lap desk and set it across Becca's wheelchair. I handed Becca my pen, the good one, with the silver nib. Her hand shook so badly I thought she might not manage it. But she did. Rebecca Ann Hayes, in careful letters that took 2 minutes to complete. Esther and Webb witnessed. Catherine notarized. Judge Clayton stamped it official. Filed and recorded, he said. The estate of Rebecca Hayes is now held in trust for the town of Cheyenne Falls. Mr. Hayes, you have no legal claim to any portion of it. Jasper's face crumpled. She's a child. She doesn't understand. She understands better than you, Clayton said coldly. And she's more generous than you'll ever be. He turned to the deputies. Jasper Hayes, you're hereby sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison for embezzlement, fraud, child abuse, and attempted kidnapping. Take him away. They dragged Jasper out. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just a broken man who'd gambled everything on a child's death and lost. When the door closed, Becca slumped in her wheelchair. Grace was there immediately, checking her pulse. Did I do good? Becca whispered. You did perfect, I said. She smiled. Then the coughing started again, deep, wet, violent. Grace measured morphine with shaking hands. The blood on the handkerchief was darker now, more of it. Sam, Grace said quietly, pulling me aside. It's time. Days now. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Not weeks. I looked at Becca, at the document that had just saved 30 families, at the child who'd given away everything to help people she'd never meet. And I knew Grace was right. The trial was over. Justice had been served. Now came the harder part, saying goodbye. The last week moved slowly, like honey in winter. Becca slept more than she woke, and when she was awake, she wasn't really present, drifting in the morphine haze, sometimes smiling at things only she could see. Grace taught me how to measure the doses. 2 drops every 4 hours for pain, she said. showing me how to count them from the brown bottle. If she's struggling to breathe, 3. If she asks for more, give it. There's no point in suffering now. My hands shook the first time I did it alone. Becca watched me with those 2 knowing eyes. "It's okay, Mr. Cordell," she whispered. "You're doing it right." I read to her every afternoon. Treasure Island, from the beginning. We'd finished it once and she wanted to hear it again. Sometimes she'd mouth the words along with me, the parts she'd memorized. Sometimes she just listened, her breathing a wet rattle that never quite stopped. The town women came in shifts, like they had during the siege. But now they came with blue ribbons pinned to their dresses, every one of them. Esther brought soup. Mary Chin brought a music box that played something soft and sweet. Even the blacksmith's wife came, a hard woman who'd never said 2 kind words in her life, and she sat by Becca's bed and cried quietly. "Why are they being so nice?" Becca asked one afternoon. "Because you gave them something nobody else would," I said. "Hope. A future. Your land means those families won't lose their ranches. Their children will have a school. That's not nothing, Becca." She thought about this. "I wish I could see it. The school, I mean." "You will. Just not the way you think." On the 6th day, she gave away her ribbons. Kept one for herself, gave the other 5 to the girls who came to visit, daughters of ranch hands and farmers, shy children, who'd heard about the girl who owned a creek and gave it away. "So you remember me," Becca said to each one. "And so you remember to be kind." On the 7th day, May 8th, she woke before dawn. I was dozing in the chair beside her bed, and her voice pulled me back. "Mr. Cordell? I'm here. Can we watch the sunrise? I want to see spring one more time." I carried her to the porch wrapped in the quilt her mother had made. Blue and white squares, soft from years of use. She weighed nothing now, just bones and breath and stubbornness. Grace followed silently, her medical bag in hand, but she stayed by the door. This moment wasn't for doctors. The sky was just starting to lighten. In the east, pale gray, turning to pink. The air smelled of warming earth and sage, that particular scent of land waking up after winter. Somewhere in the cottonwoods, a meadowlark began to sing. "It's warm," Becca said, wonder in her voice. "Really warm. First truly warm morning we've had. I got to see spring, Mr. Cordell." She smiled, that child's smile that had come so rarely and meant so much. "Uncle Jasper said I wouldn't make it, but I did." "You did." She watched the horizon, where the sun was just starting to break free. Gold light spilled across the valley, touching the new grass, the creek running full and clear, the mountains still snow-capped in the distance. A robin landed on the porch rail, cocked its head at us, and flew away. "Listen," she whispered. "The birds are so loud. Spring symphony. That's pretty. Spring symphony." She took a breath, shallow and rattling. "Mr. Cordell, can I tell you something?" "Anything. I was real scared when you found me. Thought you were just another mean person, but you weren't. You were—" She coughed, a wet sound that shook her whole frame. When she could speak again, her voice was quieter. "You were kind. Made me remember what that felt like." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. "And I'm not scared anymore. About dying, I mean." She looked up at me. "Because I know what it's like to be loved now. Even if it was just for a little while." "It wasn't little while," I managed. "And it wasn't just anything. You mattered, Becca. You matter." She reached into the quilt and pulled out my pocket watch. I'd given it to her weeks ago, and she'd kept it close ever since. "You should have this back. Give it to someone else who needs more time." I got enough. I took it, the metal warm from her body heat. "Becca." "Look," she said, her voice full of wonder. "The colors, they're so pretty." The sun was fully up now, painting the clouds in shades of orange and gold and pink. The kind of sunrise that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. The meadowlarks sang louder, competing with each other. The smell of blooming sage drifted on the warm breeze. Becca took another breath, started to say something about the light, how it made everything look new. The breath went out. The next one didn't come. I felt it happen, the way her small body relaxed completely, the tension leaving like water through a sieve. Her eyes were still open, still looking at the sunrise, but she wasn't seeing it anymore. Grace was beside me immediately, checking for a pulse she knew wouldn't be there. After a moment, she stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "She's gone, Sam." I held Becca as the sun climbed higher, warming my face, warming her still face. The birds kept singing. The creek kept running. The world kept turning, indifferent to the fact that a 9-year-old child had just left it. And I whispered the words I hadn't been able to say to Emily, the words I'd locked away for 7 years, the words that Becca had finally taught me how to speak again. "I love you, Becca. I love you. The warm wind carried them away, up into the spring sky where all lost things go. We buried her 3 days later under the cottonwood tree she'd picked herself, facing east so she could watch the sunrise forever. The whole town came. More people than I'd ever seen gathered in one place. Every woman and child wore a blue ribbon. I kept my eulogy short. She lived 9 years. Most of it was hard. Last 2 months, she knew love. She gave more than she took. That's all any of us can hope for. Esther read the land gift deed aloud, announced the Rebecca Hayes Memorial School groundbreaking would begin next month. The women had already raised half the construction funds. Pastor William said words about heaven and mercy and children of God. I didn't hear most of it. I was looking at the grave marker, simple wood, carved with her name and dates. And underneath, she gave them spring. As the last shovel of earth fell, I placed my pocket watch on top of the fresh dirt. Till someone else needs it more, I said quietly. People filed past, each dropping a wildflower, purple lupine, already blooming on the hillside. By the time the last person left, the grave was covered in purple and blue, like she was sleeping under a spring sky. Grace and I were the last ones there. The sun was setting now, gold light slanting through the cottonwood leaves. The meadowlarks had been replaced by evening birds, their songs softer, gentler. She's at peace, Grace said. I know. And you gave her that. In a world that gave her nothing but cruelty, you gave her love and dignity and a good death. That's not nothing, Sam. It was 2 months. Just 2 months. It was everything. Grace touched my arm. She changed you, made you remember how to care about something other than money and grief. That's her real legacy, not the school, not the land, you. We walked back to the house as dusk settled. Inside, the silence was different now. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of absence. Someone had lived here, mattered here, and now they were gone. On the mantel, the blue ribbon Becca had kept for herself. Beside it, a letter in her childish handwriting, composed during one of her last lucid hours. Mr. Cordell, thank you for being my papa when I needed one. Love, Becca. I read it 3 times before I could put it down. That night, I changed my will officially. The $120,000 for the hospital, another $10,000 to maintain the school, the rest split between Grace and the families downstream who needed it most. And I made a decision. The next morning, I rode into town and found the orphanage. Told the matron I wanted to help, not with money, I'd already sent money. With time, with reading lessons, with being present for children who'd been forgotten. She brought out 8 kids, ages 6 to 12, scared eyes, careful movements, the way Becca had looked when I first found her. I pulled out a book, a new copy of Treasure Island, and sat on the porch with them. Any of you know how to read? A few hands, hesitant. Then let's learn. Chapter 1. I remember him as if it were yesterday. The wind was warm, the sky was blue, and on my hat, I wore a blue ribbon tied carefully around the brim. Spring had come, and somewhere, I hoped, Becca was watching the sunrise, the way she'd always wanted. 5 years later, I stood at Becca's grave on what would have been her 14th birthday. The purple lupine had spread thick around the cottonwood, and the wooden marker had been replaced with stone, paid for by the families whose ranches still had water. Rebecca Ann Hayes, 1882, 1891. She gave them spring. The school was finished now, 20 children attending. The hospital I'd endowed had saved its first life, a boy with pneumonia, same age Becca was when she died. They named the children's ward after her. I taught reading 3 days a week. Some of the orphans I had started with had families now. Adopted by ranchers who needed help and hearts that needed filling, I'd helped arrange 4 matches myself, learning that sometimes the best use of money is bringing people together. Grace had stayed in Cheyenne Falls, her practice thriving. She'd delivered 6 babies this year, all healthy. Life keeps coming, she told me once. That's how we honor the ones who leave. And the creek still ran, clear and full, community property now, nobody owning it and everybody tending it. On hot days, I'd see children splashing in the shallows, their laughter carrying up to my porch. I never did find where that pocket watch ended up. Left it on the grave and it vanished within a week. I like to think someone who needed time took it. That's what Becca would have wanted. People ask me sometimes why I did it. Took in a dying child, fought her uncle, changed my whole life for 2 months. With someone I barely knew. I tell them the truth. I didn't save her. She saved me. Taught me that a man's wealth isn't counted in dollars or land. It's counted in sunrises shared, in books read aloud, in the moment a scared child decides to trust you, in knowing, when your time comes, that you loved something more than you feared losing it. I thought I went to buy a horse that day. Turns out I went to learn what a heart's really for. The meadowlarks were singing, the sun was warm, spring had come again, the way it always does. And somewhere in the wind, I could still hear a child's voice saying, I got to see spring, Mr. Cordell. That's more than I hoped for. More than any of us can hope for, really. to see spring, to give it to others, to know you mattered while you were here. That's enough. That's everything.